So I'm Lisa Dibsdall, I'm the Principal Occupational Therapist for Adult Care at Wiltshire Council. I'm also a PhD student part-time here at UWE, and tonight I'm talking about my PhD study, Occupational Therapist in Reablement Services. I'm talking about reablement services for people with poor physical or mental health. It's about people learning or relearning those skills if they've had some kind of incident or injury, coming from personalisation and preventative services which the government are promoting. So reablement and OTs, there's no blueprint for the delivery of these reablement services. Some are led by local authorities, some integrated with health, and many involving other agencies. Occupational therapists are members of some of the reablement services, but not all of them. So my interest was actually in those services where occupational therapists are, what do they do and what influences their effectiveness? And that brought me to Realist Research, which aims to analyse the underlying reasons behind how and why complex social interventions work or do not work. A common question in Realist Research is this one: what works for whom in what circumstances and why? So unlike Shay, I'm more of a qualitative researcher, and here it's in Realist Research, it's about context, mechanism and outcomes. An action is causal only if its outcome is triggered by a mechanism acting in context. Now that might sound a bit gobbledygook to you, it sounded a little bit like that to me too. So here's an example. What's this? Something you might have done at school. Iron filings and a magnet. There it is. Well done. So iron filings and a magnet. If we think of context, if I swapped that magnet for a piece of wood, it wouldn't do that. Okay. So the context would be different. And when we think of mechanism, what is the underlying reason for why it's making that pattern? In this case, it's magnetism. So I'm looking for those underlying reasons. So realist synthesis is the way in the realist research of finding that kind of theory to test, finding those context, mechanisms and outcomes. And as well as reviewing the literature, it suggests that you should use experts in the field to see what they say about how a programme should work. So I went via the College of Occupational Therapists to Occupational Therapists in Reablement Services, and this is just one of the programme theories they came up with. That actually in the period of reablement, people might see an OT, they might have an assessment, and the occupational therapist might provide equipment and adaptations, and that might lead to an increased quality of life for the service user and less ongoing care. But we can't see any mechanism really about why there. So there's me. I would say I used to be blonde, but I didn't. So after screening quite a lot of articles and appraising them, I was looking for those context mechanisms and outcomes, and they call it a configuration of those. So I've given an example. If service users have quick access to OTs to assess for and provide equipment and adaptations, that's the context, and service users accept those equipment or adaptations, the mechanism, then service users are able to complete daily tasks more easily, and that's the outcome. So I'm looking for how these things meet together. Once I had some theories, you go back to the literature and broaden it out a little. So I looked at occupational therapists working with service users in the community as well as in reablement services. And the theories I had come into these three categories, and I'm just going to touch on two of those today. So equipment and adaptations. The literature was saying that provision of equipment adaptations can increase independence and prevent or delay admission to care homes, so there was an outcome. That equipment was acceptable to most people and still used over a period of time. So that acceptability was the mechanism. That quick access to OTs was more important than having OTs within a reablement team, a context. And delayed access prevented new people joining the reablement service and also could be frustrating for service users. So some more outcomes. With training and supervision of support workers, there was a lot of information about support workers in reablement services and how greater training and supervision could lead to increased job satisfaction. So I looked at how OTs were involved. That they have the knowledge to train people, but at the moment they were mostly doing informal training. So my conclusions from my review was that there was some evidence, but not really enough, that few OTs were actually involved in a lot of studies, and there was need for further research. So mine is a qualitative multiple case study design of 3 reablement services, observing and interviewing people in reablement teams. Currently, I'm identifying more context mechanisms and outcomes, and motivation has come up as something, communication and trust between agencies, and the financial constraints. My reflections, Realist Synthesis has been a really good framework for my case study research. That Realist Research is an iterative process presented in a linear format for you today and will be in my thesis, which can be quite difficult. But if you're interested in Realist Research, I've benefited from being in the Ramesses email network, one full of people who know a lot about Realist Research, but welcome any question from anyone. So I recommend them. Thank you.